This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
This story happened about 50 years ago. So in the late 60s at the University of Chicago, there were a group of young women who helped their fellow classmates at that time get safe abortions because they were hearing about people dying going for illegal abortions. So they set out to help one student, and then it became like a code name of Jane when other students wanted to get some help. So Ask for Jane was the title that they came up with this movie about the Jane Collective. It's a wonderful story, a true story, and it's exactly why I wanted to make this. But what we want to show with this movie is that we want young women to go to this movie and to understand that these rights that were given in the late 60s could be taken away.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that those rights are not taken away from us.
This story is now. When I saw the Georgia thing, I also read that across the 50 states, there's like 1,100 restrictive laws about abortion. There's more. It's like doubling every year. So there's so many ways I could introduce you, but Caroline, owner of the iconic Caroline's Comedy Club here in Times Square, New York City. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And also, very importantly, and what we're going to discuss also is you're a producer of the upcoming movie Ask for Jane, which has a fascinating story. We'll talk about it. It's based on a true story that I had no idea about, and it was so entertaining and informative and shocking at the same time as I was watching it. So I'm kind of teasing this without saying the story, but good job on producing that movie.
Thank you. Thank you.
I guess I want to go in 3 different directions, because how do you, from scratch, put together such a great movie like that? Then the actual story itself was so interesting. And then, of course, I want to talk to you about, what you've done here since the 80s, setting up such a great comedy club. I mean, I was just talking with Greg, your the head of PR, how we were trying to debate, would you say this is the number 1 iconic comedy club of New York City, or, top 3? But it's certainly in there. The argument could be made in for the direction of number 1.
Well, I would say it's probably the number 1 club in the country.
You go.
I'm not going to stop with New York City.
There you go.
Because once you make it here to be number 1, then you really have, you're number 1 in the country.
I agree with that. So, and part of the reason it's you could say it's number 1 is, I mean, think of all the comedians that either got their start here or part of their start here. Like, you've had every single comedian we talk about today has either headlined here or been the doorman here or somewhere in between.
Well, I think, years ago in the early 80s, I opened this club about 35 years ago. So in the early 80s, we came up with this formula, like we were going to pay people. You had a formula out in LA, and you had Catch a Rising Star, and these were called showcase clubs, and they never paid the performer. They gave him maybe taxi fare or something like that. And that's how they ran their clubs. And I decided that I was going to have a nightclub in New York where we paid somebody to come in, and they worked for like 2 weeks at a time so we could get the word out. And, the first one that we brought in like that was Jay Leno.
Huh, that's funny. So what were the economics of something like that? Because the reason the showcase clubs pay, let's say, $50, you put 7 comics on, it's $350. And the door, if you have 100 or 150 people, $20 plus a 2-drink minimum, the economics work out. Mm-hmm. So how do you make the economics work out if you're paying like a big amount for a headlining star that you then promote?
Well, the economics, it's just like any kind of going to any live event. You pay a performer a certain amount of money, and then you have to raise the ticket prices. So it's just like going to a big live concert now at Madison Square Garden when you're paying hundreds of dollars for tickets. So it's same formula. It's on what you're paying and what you can bring in. We have about 300 seats here, so when you do the math, you know what without giving away the door like a lot of clubs do. So.
And also, it's, Times Square location, you get enormous foot traffic. So if you have a big name on the front, plus all the foot traffic, that's a good combination as well.
It helps.
Yeah.
I mean, the area helps. It absolutely does.
So,
people pass by. Oh my God, I see Tracy Morgan here tonight. I'll come in. It's like.
And Tracy Morgan kind of got his start here, right?
He did. This was kind of his first club that we have headlined.
I read one interview you gave where you said people didn't really get Tracy at first, and now he's still doing kind of the same type of style. And now, of course, everyone knows his style is famous. That kind of smart goofiness that seems clueless but isn't. And why do you think they didn't get him then?
It's perception. You know what happens if people say to somebody else, oh, that Tracy Morgan is just so funny now. Oh, yeah, you're right. He's funny now. I mean, that happens a lot. People have to understand and have to hear from other people. Oh my goodness, I just saw this Bill Burr. He was fabulous. I just saw this Gary Shandling. He was great. I mean, it's gone on over the ages like that. So we kept bringing Tracy back because we always believed in him. And then I think after, he was on Saturday Night Live for a long time.
But before, like when he was just starting, what did you, like, because, I don't know if you were ever the actual talent booker at the place, but you certainly saw all the talent and would make your judgments and bring people in and support people, like you said, with Tracy Morgan, support their efforts. What did you see? I'll ask you a couple of comedians if that's okay. Like, what did you see with Tracy Morgan that nobody else saw?
There was an honesty about him. He was just really funny, organically funny. I mean, Tracy will sit in the chair and talk to you and he'll make you, cry that he's so funny. It's just this ornate ability that he has. And it's just, I was just talking about him a few minutes ago, about his last performance at the Beacon Theater with us during the New York Comedy Festival and how brilliant it was. He wrote this whole new hour of new material, and it was just fabulous. Not talking about his accident any longer, carrying on about, everything else he's doing in life.
And what about like a Jerry Seinfeld? I'm sure before he hit it big, he was hanging out here all the time.
Jerry performed at my first and second club. That was way back, and I think Jerry headlined in like 1983. And I remember we're talking to Jerry just recently about him headlining and doing New Year's Eve in the club. And he said it was just a real big feather in his cap at that time when he did that. But there was an honesty about Jerry also. He talked about everyday things that we all went through. And, I'll never forget one of his jokes is like, every time I do the laundry, I think about that extra sock. Where did it go in the dryer or in the washing machine? I mean, there was an honesty that we all shared about having that same experience.
And he's probably the only one who could get away with doing that joke again 30 years later, and people still laugh. They don't mind. They don't say, "Oh, I heard him do this joke before." It's like they still laugh at it because you're right. There's this truth to it, without it necessarily being true. We don't, like, he probably doesn't do his laundry.
Anymore. Maybe not anymore.
Maybe he did that, maybe he didn't. Who knows? But I always wonder this thing about, they say comedians should mind their life, should find their voice, should be authentic. And some do by just observations that aren't necessarily exactly true in their life, and some do by telling stories about their life and finding the funny there. I mean, what do you prefer, or what have you seen? I mean, you've probably seen it all, but what's
I think
what's honesty to you?
I think that a lot of young let's look at a person that's just starting out, who's probably out of school, dabbled a little, probably at about 25, that is probably writing jokes and trying to talk about their life now. But I think as a comedian gets older, they get more to talk about because their life is much more fulfilled. Like you'll see with Jerry Seinfeld. I mean, he started from being a single guy doing his laundry to now talking about his children. So it's a pattern that great performers go through.
Yeah, I guess like if you, even though he's a controversial name now, if you think of like Louis C.K.'s comedy for many years, it was sort of absurdist and silly. And then suddenly, I remember the one special, I was listening with my daughter actually, and he said, my daughters are bitches. And suddenly, like, my daughter like it's like she's shocked. Like, are they listening to him saying that? And then, but that like really, I feel catapulted him mainstream was when he was opening up on personal issues, on his own growth. That became a growth in his comedy.
Absolutely. So there's the perfect example. He started off as this goofy guy from Boston. I mean, I met him when he was probably 19 years old. And then when he got into his late 30s, early 40s, when he had children and then he got divorced and he brought that all into his act, you watched all the other 40-year-olds in the audience going, oh my God, that's me too. So there's this community that watches the comedian that knows and puts, oh my God, that happened to me too. So that's why. And that really put him over the top.
So, yeah. So, I mean, you must have seen this quite a bit where comedians are young and they're 19 years old and they're, hey, can I get stage time? And you see them as kids and then you see them just rise up and suddenly are making 20 million a movie, or, like, a Kevin Hart, or you see a Dave Chappelle who's getting 20 million a special. And I don't know how old he was when he started here, but I imagine it was when in his teens. How does that make you feel that you kind of were a big part of this process of their growth, both artistically and financially?
Well, I think that, I met Dave. He lied about his age. He was probably like 17. He came up from Washington and we would put him on like,
how old did he say he was?
Not a new talent, like as an opening act or just trying out or like a special guest tonight. And we watched him evolve. I mean, and you can see that after he did stand up for a long time. And then when he had the show on Comedy Central, you can see how that highlighted more of his talent about what he can do. And then when he took the hiatus and now has gone back again, I would say that, Dave is probably one of the most brilliant stand-up comedians today.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Is he doing, I mean, he just did the 4 specials on Netflix last year or the year before. And then he just, today or yesterday, they announced he's winning the Mark Twain Award as Best Humorist of the Year. Is he doing another Netflix special?
I don't know. Those specials, Dave taped them on his own. And then I guess when the time was right and the price was high enough, he sold them to Netflix. So he had taped all of that. He had all that material that he had taped on his own and then re-released it.
What do you think of Netflix doing? Like, they're doing like 100 specials with comedians. Does it dilute kind of the power of any one special? I mean, it's like every other comedian's getting a special. They're not all.
I'm not going to say that Netflix, doesn't know what they're doing, but they see a market here for stand-up. And they've certainly set the price very high for other pay cable and streaming outfits that, would like to do business with comedians. But the more the merrier. But, people weed out what they don't want to see. You'll see, you put enough on TV, you'll weed out and you'll have the best, and just that's how it'll be.
But, it's an interesting thing, the kind of Netflix and even Amazon phenomenon. Like you in the early days, you had your own show, Carolyn's Comedy Hour. I forget the exact title.
I did, and that was the title.
and it went on A&E, and you did 6 seasons of 26 episodes each, and that you were getting 1 million viewers an episode. I don't even know if that hits the top 10 shows now on broadcast. Like, media has totally changed. Like, the TV landscape has changed. And live experience, though, is still relevant, still important, because that's an experience. You go out and you do it. And what do you think is going to happen to kind of TV and entertainment in general?
Oh, I think that, the content business is here to stay. I just personally love it, that there's more out there to watch. There's 2 parts of it. We talk about the live experience, which is definitely growing, because people want to get out of where they are because they're watching all the content and they're also on their device all day long. So it's part of being in a situation with other people. That's why the live experience has been in a boom in the last few years. But, you can't beat it out that, we have all those great TV shows to watch now, and it's really, I love it. So I'm sure everybody else loves it.
Yeah, but I was thinking though, and I promise we're going to get to the movie, because So all right, we'll just get to the movie.
No. I think I understand what you said. So yes, when I had my A&E show, I mean, we came out of the box with like 1 million people on a Sunday night. And I remember being there on a Sunday night at the club because I think we were taping something. And I was there with Abby Raven, who was the executive on my project at that time. And she told me, oh my goodness, we got these great ratings. This is really super. Because it was her TV show at A&E. And over the years, you learned about all of the rating points. And now, if a show, now shows barely get, a 0.3.
Yeah.
And sometimes when they get a 0.5, they go, it's a hit.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, it has changed, but that's because we are so diluted out there. There's so many different places to go for what you want.
But like, can the networks then afford to do, could you make a show like Lost anymore, which cost $100 million for the series premiere? Like, can that be possible anymore with numbers so much lower? Like, we were talking recently to one of the main producers of The Simpsons for many years, and their first show was 26 million viewers. Now, like, their last show was 1.3 million viewers. So, can they still do the same thing?
I guess the economics are not there any longer. I guess The Simpsons, my goodness. How many years has that been on? 28 years? I don't know. It's just been amazing. Yeah, it's gone. But it's not that they're gone. They're just gone to a lot of other places. So it's fractions of what they used to get.
So given that, and then this is my segue to the movie, movie business also is hard. Like, it used to be the case, indies had a shot. Like, particularly I think in the 90s, maybe in the early 70s, there were different periods where non-superhero, non-franchise movies could hit the top 10 for a weekend. I feel now it's all franchise movies. Studios don't want to take a risk unless this is a shot for several $100 million in box office revenues, at least, like minimum. What made you, so Ask for Jane, it's a story I had never heard of. And by the way, I'm even embarrassed to say I asked you that. I said that to you when we first were introduced outside. I said, oh, I never heard of this story. And then even in your PR packaging, it says, everybody says, I never even heard this story before. But it seems like such an interesting, pivotal story in the landscape of Roe versus Wade and all the politics around that. So it's about a set of girls, ended up being called the Jane Collective, but a set of girls who wanted to help other women get abortions, which were then illegal. So they had a number pregnant girls could call, and they would ask for Jane, and that meant they needed an abortion, and these girls would then hook them up with a doctor, and gradually, like any arc of the hero, more and more complicated and problematic things happened along the way that put everybody essentially in crisis. And your movie, Ask for Jane, covers this whole story, is beautifully dramatic. Like, you wouldn't know it's really based on a true story. It's really, riveting. Like, what's going to happen? Because then, I won't give anything away, but like amazing things happen to these girls and to their patients and so on. And then, of course, Roe versus Wade happens towards, the end of the movie. We're making abortion legal. But there were so many things I didn't know about kind of the cluelessness of society. Just, what is that, like 50 years ago now? It was sort of mind-blowing. I didn't know that. I just thought, oh, okay, it was illegal or in most places or all places, so people had complications getting an abortion. I didn't know that everybody's values were so twisted around even the issues of birth control and so on. Can I say the one scene with the doctor?
Sure.
Or you could describe it. You describe it.
No, sure. No, this story happened about 50 years ago. So in the late 60s at the University of Chicago, there were a group of young women who helped their fellow classmates at that time get safe abortions because they were hearing about people dying going for illegal abortions. So they set out to help one student, and then it became like a code name of Jane when other students wanted to get in touch with to get some help. So you Ask for Jane was the title that they came up for this movie about the Jane Collective. It's a wonderful story, a true story, and it's exactly why I wanted to make this. A young woman came to me about this story because she had heard about it. She's a generation younger than me. She came up with the story because she heard about it through some other way and wanted to do something about it. So she came to me looking for financing. I said, let's try to work on this and get it done. And we did. It was written by Rachel Carey. She's a screenwriter, directed by Rachel Carey, produced by women, made by women. It's all women on the staff. There were a few men peppered in there that helped out also. We can't eliminate the men from anything, but it was. And I went for it because this is an amazing story about these brave women that really, were, up for, criminal charges because of what they did.
Now they make the point in the movie, one of the characters makes the point that they thought they weren't really going to get in trouble. They were sort of deluded into thinking they weren't going to get in trouble at all, that they were very safe somehow. But then they realized, oh, this is very illegal, even though many people don't believe it should be. It was in fact very illegal, and you could get potentially serious jail time. When you've spoken to people who were, as part of your diligence on the movie, I'm assuming you spoke to people involved in the actual, Jane Collective back then. Do you think they were ever scared? Do you think they were legitimately scared that they were going to get caught and get in trouble?
Yeah, I think after they graduated and then they went out to help the community more of the surrounding area in Chicago, what they did, at the end of all of this, they helped about 11,000 women obtain a safe abortion. That's what they helped to do. But I think that truly down deep in their hearts when they were doing this, they felt that it was their right. They did it to help other women get out of a situation that was really scary. And I think they felt it was like, you can't tell a woman what to do with her body. And they really believed that. And I think that helped them through that whole crisis about doing something illegal. They did not think they were doing anything illegal. They would just thought it was their right to help other women.
You know what I like too, just from kind of a philosophical point there, if they wouldn't give advice either way. So if someone said, should I do this? They would just say it's up to you, which I really feel is, sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I feel, so obviously I'm pro-choice, but I feel sometimes pro-choice movements are ignore the fact that there's really two sides. Sometimes it's good to have a baby. Sometimes it's good to have an abortion. And but these women in the movie were just like, it's totally up to you. They never offered an opinion, which I thought was
they never offered an opinion. They were just trying to help out somebody in a crisis of whether or not to have the baby and get them maybe the means to do that. But the other part of it is that, nobody wants to have an abortion, okay? Nobody sets out to say, I'm going to get pregnant and now I'm going to have an abortion. That's not how it happens. It happens because you're not ready. It happens because maybe there was an accident with birth control. It happens because maybe you did not have the right birth control or maybe you didn't know enough about it. So, you can't just say that. And you know what? Every woman is an individual and every woman feels differently about when she wants to have a baby or not. So it's a very personalized situation, but nobody clearly sets out to say, I want to have an abortion. It's not anything like that. It's a decision that a woman makes and she loses sleep over it. And after she has an abortion, that scar is with her for probably the rest of her life because she did something that maybe might have been worked out a different way, but it didn't for her at that time. So, people that do it do not take it lightly.
And there was also all these issues in the movie that women didn't really even understand, how pregnancy really worked in some cases, or how, there was the one woman who gets an abortion and she didn't understand that she had been raped and that's why she got pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just so almost like innocent about it and yet traumatized by it. And I just, these kind of things don't really happen in society the same way. And I was just surprised, like there was the issue with the doctor who refused to give the 22-year-old woman birth control because And then she said, she asked even, if I was married, would you give it to me? And she said, if your husband said it was okay. And you were just telling me earlier that was the law. I didn't know that was the law. I thought that was just the doctor's judgment.
No. That was kind of a law at that time. I mean, doctors didn't want to do that. These archaic laws that existed in 1968 was probably closer to like 1970 when that happened. But that was true. I mean, and when that part of the movie comes up now, you hear a chuckle in the audience like, "Oh my God, how ridiculous is that?" But this is what young women did face at that time.
Yeah, and then there was the other thing that was astonishing to me, that apparently if 3 people gathered around a table, for instance, and started talking about abortion, then that was against the law.
Because that was considered manslaughter. If 3 people are in a room and talk about abortion, those are grounds for manslaughter.
So like if Steve Cohen came up here right now and sat down and we all said, do you have to be advising someone to get an abortion with 3 people? So, okay, we were advising Steve to get his relative an abortion. Then we're committing manslaughter or aiding and abetting.
Well, not in New York, thank God. Not in Illinois any longer either.
Well, not anywhere now.
But in Chicago in the late 60s, yes. Mm-hmm.
What other stuff did you discover making this movie that astonished you?
Well, the whole story about how many women came through it.
Yeah, 11,000.
Yeah.
And
how many women really wanted to help too.
Right. So part of the argument about Roe versus Wade was that women were going to get abortions no matter what, and so many women were dying. And I won't say the specific scenes, but is riveting how you describe this in the very beginning of the movie, but which really keeps you in there. Like that was shocking. But what was amazing is that of these 11,000 women that these girls helped, the Abortion 7 or the Jane Collective.
The Abortion 7. Yeah.
None of the 11,000 women died, for instance.
There was one incident of somebody having a procedure, and only because she tried to abort herself and then came to the group for help, and they brought her to a hospital. But she had already tried to do something to herself, and she, caused some hemorrhaging, and then she eventually passed away afterward. But not because of the Janes. The Janes were trying to help her after she tried her own procedure.
How would people try on their own?
Well, there's all sorts of things with knitting needles, spokes of umbrellas. It's, trying to abort their babies, punching themselves in the stomach, or paying somebody to punch them in the stomach.
Oh my gosh.
Or jumping off like a 1-story building and trying to abort the baby that way. Knowing that you might break something, but then you might abort easily enough. So, they did this out of a way, like, as you see in the movie, there was a classmate that was trying to take her life, and that's what set them up to try to help her. And it was a way of saving women's lives and helping women that they fought to do. And I thought they were very brave women. They gave a lot of their own life and money to it, and then they stayed there after college.
And it's the movie itself is written like the true arc of the hero. Like you have, the main character who is the first person to answer the phone for Jane, and she's like this, what seems like an ordinary girl. She'd like to figure out how to have impact and protest, but even the class she was in that was all about protesting, he was very focused on, men's kind of issues. And I like the line that Janice says to her, which is like, we're always protesting about Vietnam. Men are the one going to Vietnam. We're on the front line protesting about Vietnam, but they don't give a shit about women's issues. Rachel Carey that wrote the screenplay, she did that brilliantly. She got that piece in there, and a lot of people pick up on that piece. And then they're at a SDS, conference there, and they're talking about, men dying in Vietnam, and they say, well, what about the women dying from abortion? And they go, oh yeah, and they put that on the bottom of the list of what they want to help do. So, and it sets it up where the women go get the coffee, for the men,
and they're protesting for the men in Vietnam, but the men don't really care about, their problem.
Right, but then it's...
And that's true. That's true at that time.
I mean, it's probably true even now. Like every step of the way, there's new issues and new conflicts about this. But like, I just, again, love the fact that, okay, she's this ordinary girl trying to figure things out. The call to action is, how do we keep helping these girls just like they help the classmate? And of course, at first she rejects the call to action, but then is frustrated enough with, always fighting for men's issues and not women's issues that she decides to start doing it. And then the problems get successively harder. Like they graduate. So how do they do it? They meet doctors who aren't necessarily upfront about everything. And, it just gets harder and harder, all the problems they face. And so I just thought, again, it's this riveting, true story, but in the context of well-written. Like if anybody wants to learn story structure, this movie has this perfect structure, it seems, right up until the very end. And, it's interesting, by the way, when you follow the lives of all the characters and particularly the main ones you're able to follow in real life, what they ended up doing. They became real serious, I don't want to say protesters because that sounds...
Advocates. They became advocates for women.
And they really created a lot of change and, even working for presidential administrations. So it was, what would you say to, would you say now there's issues like that are so clear-cut? So when I say clear-cut, here's something where, I don't know if a million people, I don't know how many people were getting an abortion a year, but, there was all sorts of risks and expenses and people dying and people being humiliated and lives being ruined. And, until it became legal. Would you say there's any kind of issue like that now that is so impactful across the entire country?
Well, we're what's happening right now in Congress is that, we're seeing this across the country, is that they're trying to dwindle away at these rights that women have to seek their own reproductive health the way they want to do.
Right, like what's the new thing in Georgia?
Georgia was just passed yesterday. It's the heartbeat law. It's considered 6 weeks. You're not allowed in Georgia to get or seek an abortion after 6 weeks of being pregnant. Listen, most women don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. They just think they may be just something late, something not happening right in their body. They don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. Where is it that someone needs to tell you about what to do with your own body? I mean, this is really outrageous. And this is in Ohio, this is in Alabama, this is going across the country. Listen, women that do not have money and really need to go out and get an abortion are really having a hard time doing it. Look, if you have money, you can probably get anything done you want to do, whether you break the law or not. But women, they've made it so hard right now for anybody to get a safe abortion. And that's really a pity. And you're going to see more and more women die.
Well, when I saw the Georgia thing, I also read that there across the 50 states, there's like 1,100 restrictive laws about abortion. It's like doubling every year. So somehow or other, it's like this creeping, attack on Roe versus Wade. Which the other thing I learned in the movie is that Roe versus Wade was based on privacy issues. So, which is a weird way to put it. It's like this sort of backdoor way to kind of solve the problem, as opposed to just simply saying, "Look, leave women alone already." They had to kind of come up with a way. Oh, it's a woman's right to privacy, not her right to choice. So but like you think about this Georgia thing, doesn't that conflict with the right to privacy? Won't that, if that goes up to the Supreme Court, they've got to throw that out?
Well, they're waiting for it to go to the Supreme Court. This is all, they're setting all of this up to go to the Supreme Court. And we are 50-50 in the Supreme Court right now for, about which way it'll vote. So they're just dying to get it up there. They're dying to get a decision.
I'm just curious.
I'm talking about the opponents. I'm talking about the opponents to pro-choice are dying to get a ruling in the Supreme Court about this.
Well, and I'm curious what you think about this. Let's say specifically this Georgia law gets up to the Supreme Court, and clearly Roe versus Wade should shut it down instantly. But as you mentioned, it really depends on the personal opinions of the justices. do you think Brett Kavanaugh would vote for or against that Georgia law?
For it.
He would vote for it. Because the one theory I had is that he had so much antagonism, of course, that he created and he created from women during the nomination process, that maybe he would try to pander a little by not being anti-choice, by being pro-choice.
I hope so, but I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
We can be optimistic about it, but I don't think that's the case.
Were you ever worried that if he didn't get nominated, the next in line was apparently like an evangelical who certainly wouldn't have?
Well, the next in line probably wouldn't have gotten nominated either.
Oh, okay. So
that wouldn't go through.
Yeah, so now that the movie's done, it's coming out May 17th. Where's it coming out?
It's opening in New York at the Village East Theater that weekend, and then to open around the rest of the country in the weeks to come.
And what do you hope for in that process? Like, obviously you hope it gets good reviews.
Well, yeah. You know what? It's like, it's a tiny movie. It's a really important movie. I think it was well made, as you talked about the structure of the story.
And good acting.
Great actresses in it. People that people will recognize from TV shows and from movies.
That woman from The Good Wife.
The Good Wife, that's Sarah Steele. She's in that. Chloe Levine, Sarah Ramos, that was in Parenthood. Cody Horn from Magic Mike. Ben Rappaport from Shonda Rhimes' new series that's on in New York. Is Allison Wright from The Americans. Michael Rabb. Great group of actors and actresses in the movie.
And so let's say it gets good reviews. Let's say it sells out at Village East, which is a fairly small independent theater in New York. What happens next? Does an AMC ever pick it up, or?
Well, we'll see. We're going to be opening around the country through our distributor, which is Level Film, and then also through My Cinema, which is this technical distribution system that they have to go to small theaters around the country. It's really cool. So we'll see. We have to see what happens after this first weekend. But what we want to show with this movie is that we want young women to go to this movie and to understand that these rights that were given in the late 60s could be taken away.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that those rights are not taken away from us.
It's almost like in the closing credits, you could almost list all the, just for the heck of it, list the, let's say, 1,100 restrictions that currently happen, just as a reminder that this story is now.
Yeah, I know. We closed out the credits, but there could be added things could have gone in there in the last few weeks to see what was going on with it. The thing about the movie is I don't know if it was like some sort of, like spiritual thing about doing this movie and hitting right now when this is the topic of conversation with women about losing these rights. And the movie is so poignant and relative to that.
And, for a movie like this, what has to happen for it to get noticed, let's say by, and I'm just naive, I don't know. So what has to happen for it to get noticed by an Oscars or things like that?
Well, I don't, I love this, that James loves this movie.
I did, we were
and you're a pretty observant person. That's really great. We'd like it to get noticed. And we'd like people to say, what a great movie, and you need to see it. And because of this story. These are women, and these women are alive. Heather Booth will be at the first showing of the movie we're doing a Q&A and on Friday night at the theater.
Oh, we're at Village East?
Yes, at Village East.
She's the one I'm referring to. Like, she was involved in as an advocate for so many things. Like, this is... She's
the Jane.
Yeah.
So Heather Booth,
well, she's like the Rose character, right?
She's the Rose character. It was one of her friend's sisters when they were at school. That was the incident that started it. So Heather's going to come up from Washington, and she's going to talk about it. We're going to have a panel discussion at the movie.
And how active were you in kind of putting it all together? Like, what did you do?
Well, I have to tell you that it came to me, it was written already. It was pretty much plotted out. And then we kind of put the financing together to get it done. And
how much did it cost?
Kate could tell you, it's a very low budget movie. I'll just say very low.
Yeah, there's a couple of sets.
We shot that in Brooklyn, but it looked like a college campus. We shot it in Brooklyn. was pretty much made in about 30 days, which like kind of an hour and a half movie's made in 30 days. So they were proud of it. People work for scale. The costumers, you'll see people have commented about how the women look in it and how they change a little bit over the years, just a bit. So it was a great crew. Lots of women worked on it, and we'll see what happens with it. But we're very proud of it.
And, I was reading, there's another, I don't know if it ever got made or finished, but there was another movie starring Michelle Williams also about the Jane Collective. So what's the story of that? And
I don't know.
You get worried about it?
I don't know. What happened was when that happened, I had said to a friend of mine, Melissa Silverstein, who runs Women in Hollywood, I've been very involved in that organization from when she first started it. It's 10 years old now. So I told her about the project, and she loved it. She said, "Oh, this is great. You got to do this movie." And about 2 months later, she sends me a clip from Deadline saying that Amazon had just purchased a script about the Jane Collective. So I said to her, "So what do you think? We should make it?" She says, "Absolutely. Whoever knows if this movie will ever get made."
And also, if it does, and it's just on Amazon, it could easily. How many shows are there? There's like 1,000 shows on Amazon.
Well, yeah, and then and whatever it was, and then there was some, and then people were writing up, "Oh, there's 2 movies about this subject." Well, I guess a lot of people were thinking about this was a good thing to make a movie about, which is good.
Yeah, and there's recent documentaries
too. But
too.
then they got slammed because it was all men making it was a man director, writer, all making a movie about women. So it got slammed for that.
Well, you know what? Researching the movie, I never heard of this thing, the Bechdel metric, where basically a movie is female friendly if at least 2 women are talking about a subject that didn't have a man involved.
Didn't revolve around a man.
Yeah. Like 2 women, and like in Sex and the City, 2 women are always talking about men.
This is a AAA pass on this movie. It's not about men at all. It's about them.
And so, did you even think of that when, like, how?
Well, I knew about the test. Oh yeah, we knew about that. Yeah.
So, I guess I'll segue a little bit into, people are constantly talking about women in comedy. Wish more women were involved in comedy. Do you see the women in comedy thing as an issue in this world? The world of comedy clubs and comedy specials and.
I always worked with women comedians. I'm still friendly with, 2 women that I got really friendly with that worked for me the first year I ever opened. Carol Leifer, who is a writer-producer. Carol Leifer, who just finished the last season of Curb as one of the producers. And Sandra Bernhard. I keep in contact with them. So it's like I met them almost 35 years ago. And I'm still in contact with them. And those were the original women. It was Sandra Bernhard, Carol Leifer, it was Rita Rudner, and Elaine Boozler. Those were like the 4 women that worked at my club the first year. And the rest of the weekends were men. But you have the same thing today. Look, there are a lot more young women going into this business than ever, and a lot more young women on the stage than ever. And I think that comes from, a lot of the young women right now in their 20s, and older, but I'm saying like right now coming out of it, they grew up watching the Comedy Channel, Comedy Central, and the Hot Channel, and they kind of got their news from Jon Stewart, and they kind of grew up with lots of comedy around them, and they knew that if they enjoyed that they might be able to do that too. And that's why there's been many more women in the business.
Yeah, it's both comedians
and writers and producers. And I look, I think that Amy Poehler and Tina Fey really opened up the door after they hosted the Golden Globes. When they hosted the Golden Globes, I think they really opened up the door to prove that women were really funny.
And I think also, like even more recently, let's say Amy Schumer or Lena Dunham, with their shows and Amy Schumer as a stand-up. So
yeah. Oh, there's more. Lena Dunham, she accepted an award from the Writers Guild for girls. And she gets up on stage and she says, "Well, I just have to thank my mother because my mother took me to Caroline's for New Year's Eve. And I saw Lisa Lampanelli, and I owed it all to going to Caroline's that I'm in this business today. It was like, wow. And then I find out that Lena took a stand-up class here and graduated from the Caroline's Comedy School. Yeah.
So what?
So she's of that generation. Now, she's like late 20s, 30s. So you have that generation that came to see, you have the 30s, and then you have the 20s right now. And you have the Amy Poehler and the Tina Fey in the 40s. So, a lot of women coming out to do comedy now.
Who do you see as up and coming comics right now?
I like to watch Lisa Schrager, Yamaneika Saunders.
I love Yamaneika Saunders.
Yeah.
She is amazing.
She's amazing. Actually, she's going to the Ms. Foundation dinner with me tonight. We go every year
really?
together. Yeah.
Tell her James Altucher said she was amazing. I talk to her all the time. So, and Steve, we got to get Yamaneika on the podcast. Exactly. So love her. And she's been doing really well, like slowly but surely. I think she's, getting past that tipping point that many comedians go through.
It is a tipping point. You're right. That's a good phrase to use. It is a tipping point. You'll see somebody do stand-up for like 7 or 8 years, and then that 9th year, they just go boom. They just explode. There's just something about it. Don't know what it is. It's just doing it for so long, knowing yourself, knowing how to deliver the joke, knowing what's going to work in the room, and just getting better and better and better at it. It's really amazing.
It's an interesting thing because people sometimes confuse stand-up with being funny. People say, oh, if you're funny, you can do stand-up. But being funny is like one component that's important, but you have to learn how to perform it and how to tell a story and how to have stage presence and do crowd work, and things can go wrong in your act. And there's so many other things. Like we had in one day, we had on a comic writer who writes jokes for all sorts of events, and he writes many episodes of The Simpsons. And then we had on Susie Essman, who did stand-up for 16 years before Curb. And, the writer was just funny all the time, but he didn't have to think about how he would perform it on stage. Whereas Susie Essman said, oh yeah, about the 9-10 year point, she was good all along, but then she was really kind of finding her voice, as many comedians put it. And it seems to take, a certain number of years.
It does. It's absolutely true.
When you're looking at comedians and trying to decide, oh, okay, is this someone I'm really gonna get behind? What do you see in those situations where later on they really shoot for the stars?
Well, first you have to see when somebody's starting out, that they have their own voice and there's something unique about what they're saying. But then that doesn't always mean that they're going to be great at it. So you have to watch this person over a number of years grow, and you can really see them grow. And then there comes that aha moment when they really pop. And then they have to keep on working and working and working at it. Years ago, a lot of comedians would just their big desire was just to get their own sitcom on broadcast TV. Well, now there are so many other options open to everybody, whether it's writing and producing, doing stand-up specials for streaming services, for via cable. It's just exploded.
So, Caroline Hirsch, owner of Caroline's Comedy. Oh, by the way, one thing I wanted to mention, you're not going to remember this, but in 1999, we had lunch. So what happened was we had a mutual friend, Ed Bennett.
Oh, God.
Who I haven't spoken to since then, pretty much, but he knew from you that you were thinking about either building a website or you needed help on your website. I had just sold a company that made websites for entertainment companies. And so he introduced us, and all I remember is we talked about your website or what you wanted for your website. But we have met once before. It was the Chinese place. I forgot what it was next door. We had
Ruby Foos.
Yeah.
That's when I went to Ed because he was getting very much involved in technology. And I had this brainy idea that I was going to create Carolines.com, and that was going to be the next Comedy Central. But I should have stayed with that idea.
Well, it's interesting because at the time, I had just sold a company where I made websites, but before that I was working for HBO, making all their comedy websites, and I would go to the Aspen Comedy Festival each year and interview all the comedians and so on. This is like 1996, 97. And I would tell people, I didn't know what I was talking about, but they were scared to death when I would say, everybody's going to be watching these things on the web more than TV, and they would panic, but that's what's essentially happening now. So, but anyway, we had met once before. It's nice to meet you again. Caroline Hirsch.
Caroline, can I ask one question?
Yes, you can ask one question.
Fine, just one question. I mean, first of all, you probably don't speak to Ed Bennett anymore for introducing him to James, right? It's not.
I don't even know.
Ed Bennett was at that time. He was the head of the Ha Channel, which was the Viacom channel, which then merged with Comedy Channel to become Comedy Central.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So-
he was the head of VH1 also, and then he was the head of
Yes.
Viacom Cable, and then he was the head of Prodigy. Remember that? It was like an AOL like service.
Right. And I remember, so at that time, when Ed was head of VH1, and
Yeah.
Ha was under his umbrella
Yeah.
at that time. So I remember going to the Grammys with him. It was the best Grammys going with him. It was just so much fun.
Well, then Ed and I, for a while, co-invested together, and I lost money on 100% of those deals. But
Yeah, I know you did a very big deal early on.
Yeah.
I remember that.
yeah, there's a couple, unfortunately.
I was going to ask a broad question about, you've done comedy, now you did a serious movie. Is there one that's harder?
Did this ignite a passion in you for more movies?
Yeah. Actually, I have a number of projects in development now. And projects that will come to fruition. So we're doing something with Comedy Central, a documentary called "What a Mother" about comedians and their mothers, and I'm producing that with Loki Films. And then I have
That's great that Comedy Central.
another project with PBS that can't talk about exactly right now, but it's a go. So we're doing that, and we started a production company here to go out and produce more comedy or whatever else we want to produce.
But I was just talking about, like, Chris Rock, I remember hearing him say that it seems harder to do a serious movie than it is to do a comedy. It's harder to do a comedy, than a serious movie.
Oh, a comedy is the hardest thing to do.
Right, because it's...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Although, I was reading an interview with Adam McKay, and it was really fascinating. He said they would have test screenings, and then they would measure where the exact second where it was peak laughter, and then they would re-edit to stop the scene at peak laughter. So they kind of juiced the comedy in each, without having a laugh track or anything. They knew exactly how to edit, but based on the test audiences, it was fascinating the way he described the editing process on enhancing the comedy
he would know
movie.
because he produced live. He produced Saturday Night Live for so long. He knew exactly where they got that laugh and how to tell. Comedy is much harder to write a comedy than to write just a regular dramatic script. Much harder.
And have you ever considered using this stage to produce your own specials? So, like, let's say not the Chris Rocks of the world, and not necessarily the ones Netflix is picking up, but then you see all these shows, like I think on Amazon, the Degenerates or Inside Jokes, where it's like, comedians one after the other, as opposed to a special. On a stage, you have audience, comedians, and stage, and cameras probably all around, all the elements to make a cheap special.
We're doing it. We're doing it.
Good.
Yeah.
Good for you.
We have it in the works right now.
And then you going to a Netflix as opposed to a Netflix executive finding a comedian, you have, the authority to say, no, this one you should choose. So.
We see it right here. We know what works because we have the public that comes in here and tells us who they like. You can't beat that.
Yeah.
You give the public what they want, and we know that.
Well, again, Caroline Hirsch, thank you so much. I'm a big fan of the club, and I am a huge fan of the movie Ask for Jane, coming out May 17th. I encourage anyone to watch this no matter what. Like, it's such a great movie in a variety of ways. And thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for loving the movie.
Don't forget, you can see Ask for Jane at Village East in New York City on May 17th. What about in LA? Where can you see it?
Well, that will be opening up in a week or two.
And what other movie theater are you excited that it's opening up in?
Now, we hopefully go to Chicago, and we hope to go to a lot of small cities around the United States.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to be there at Village East. I'm going to watch it again, this time with popcorn. So thanks very much.
Thank you.